My brother erased my existence with a single text message sent exactly 48 hours before his wedding. The words glowed on my phone screen in the dim light of the LAX first-class lounge. Do not bother coming to the venue tomorrow. Maya's family expects a certain caliber of guests, and you simply do not fit the aesthetic. I will tell them you caught a severe flu. Do not make this difficult. I am Chloe, 32 years old, and I did not cry. I did not type out a frantic paragraph demanding an explanation. I set my phone face down on the marble table. I took a slow sip of my espresso, savoring the bitter edge, and unzipped my leather briefcase. Inside sat a pristine, $85,000 vendor contract for a Malibu cliffside estate. My name was signed at the bottom. My credit card was held on file for the final deposit. I closed the briefcase, opened my airline app, and changed my final destination from Los Angeles to Maui. Liam thought he could scrub me from his perfect weekend with a swipe of his thumb. He forgot one fundamental rule of survival. You never lock the door on the person holding the deed to the house. Before I tell you how a single one-way ticket dismantled a decade of family lies, take a moment to tell me where you are listening from in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever smiled quietly while someone arrogant handed you the exact weapon you needed to end their game. To understand the scale of the mistake my brother made, you need to understand the woman he was marrying. Maya is 30 years old, a corporate attorney raised by an Atlanta real estate dynasty. Her family represents the kind of generational wealth that speaks in whispers and commands entire boardrooms. My mother, Helen, viewed this marriage as our ultimate ascension. The only obstacle was the truth. Liam is 29. He portrays himself as a venture capitalist, though his actual portfolio consists of 3 failed startups and a mountain of quiet debt. My mother drained her remaining retirement accounts 2 years ago to keep his imported cars from being repossessed. When Liam decided he needed a wedding venue that rivaled a royal reception to impress Maya's father, they realized they lacked the capital to secure even the catering deposit. That is when Helen came to me. I spent the last 10 years building a luxury hospitality management firm from a cramped apartment into a nationwide operation. I handle logistics for people whose names appear in financial magazines. But in my family, my business was merely a convenient bank. Helen begged me to underwrite the Malibu estate. She claimed Liam had assets tied up in a mutual fund and needed a temporary guarantor. I signed the paperwork to ensure an innocent bride had a flawless day. In exchange, Helen told Maya's relatives I was a struggling administrative assistant, so Liam would look like the sole financial genius of our bloodline. Sitting in the lounge, listening to the boarding call for my flight to Hawaii, I felt the familiar weight of their manipulation lift off my shoulders. I stood up, left my half-empty espresso on the table, and walked toward the gate. The financial guarantee for the Malibu property required the primary cardholder to present physical identification exactly 24 hours before the rehearsal dinner to authorize the final payment. By the time Liam and Helen realized I was gone, I would be halfway across the Pacific, and their entire illusion would begin to cave in. As the flight leveled out over the Pacific Ocean, a flight attendant handed me a glass of sparkling water with a sliver of lime. I leaned back into the leather seat and watched the California coastline disappear behind a blanket of clouds. To fully comprehend the magnitude of the avalanche currently racing toward my brother, you have to picture his bride. Maya is 30 years old and operates as a corporate litigator for a top-tier firm. She traces her lineage back to an Atlanta real estate empire built generations ago by her African-American ancestors. Her family defines the concept of old money. They possess the kind of quiet authority that never needs to announce its net worth or flash a logo. Her father, Marcus, wears tailored suits without visible labels and speaks in a measured baritone that commands instant respect in any boardroom. Maya herself is sharp, perceptive, and remarkably grounded despite a childhood spent navigating exclusive country clubs and Ivy League dining halls. She is a genuinely kind woman who fell in love with a carefully curated version of my brother. My mother, Helen, looked at Maya and saw a crown. She became intensely obsessed with proving our bloodline belonged in that same elevated stratosphere. She craved the prestige by association, desperate to secure a permanent seat at their mahogany tables. The singular problem disrupting her grand design was the math. Liam is a walking financial sinkhole. Over the past 5 years, he launched 3 different tech startups, ranging from a bespoke delivery app to a chaotic cryptocurrency venture. Each business collapsed spectacularly, leaving a trail of unpaid vendors and silent, furious investors. To project an aura of success, he leased a late-model Porsche he could not afford and rented a loft in a trendy district, paying the bare minimum to keep collection agencies at bay. Helen facilitated this delusion at every turn. She quietly drained her own retirement savings down to the concrete foundation to shield him from bankruptcy. She lived in constant fear that the social circles she clung to might discover her golden boy was drowning in unsecured debt. When Marcus generously offered to cover the traditional bride family expenses for the wedding, Helen panicked. She knew a man like Marcus would expect Liam to match that energy for the groom obligations. Liam needed to secure the rehearsal dinner, a luxury transportation fleet, and the primary venue deposits. He had exactly 0 liquidity. His credit score was a burned-out shell. He could not even secure a loan for a used sedan, let alone a high-end wedding venue. That sheer desperation brought Helen to my downtown office 4 months ago. My workspace occupies a corner suite on the 30th floor, featuring glass walls and a panoramic view of the Los Angeles skyline. I built a luxury event management firm from a cramped studio apartment into a nationwide operation. I orchestrate corporate retreats for foreign dignitaries and tech executives. My mother bypassed my receptionist, ignoring the scheduling protocols, and cornered me at my desk. She wore a forced, frantic smile, her hands clutching a glossy brochure for a cliffside estate in Malibu. She pitched the lie flawlessly, as if she had rehearsed it in the mirror. She claimed Liam had his capital temporarily locked in a high-yield investment fund. She waved a manicured hand, attempting to dismiss the situation as a minor clerical error. The transfer will take 90 days to clear, she insisted, leaning over my mahogany desk. He just needs a bridge loan for the venue deposit to secure the date. You have the corporate account. Chloe, it is just a temporary hold on your card. He will pay you back the moment his dividends process. I looked at the glossy brochure. I recognized the property immediately. It is an exclusive compound that frequently hosts film premieres and charity galas. They do not accept casual bookings. Their contracts require non-refundable deposits and a rigid payment structure. More importantly, they demand a signature from a verified guarantor who takes on all liability for damages, overtime fees, and vendor coordination. I knew Liam possessed no locked funds. I knew Helen was financially destitute. But I looked at the photograph of Maya they had brought along to soften me up. She was smiling, radiant, stepping into a marriage built on a hollow foundation. I agreed to sign the paperwork, solely to protect an innocent bride from having her dream day ripped away by my brother and his incompetence. I pulled out my corporate titanium card and authorized the initial charges. By doing so, I became the sole legal guarantor for every piece of rental equipment, every square foot of that cliffside property, and the entire catering staff. You would think saving the family from public humiliation might earn a fraction of gratitude. Instead, it earned me a silent demotion. Helen quickly realized my actual career threatened the fabricated image she had constructed for Liam. If Marcus discovered I built a nationwide empire while his future son-in-law played pretend on social media, the contrast would invite unwanted questions. The truth would expose the fragile lie holding the engagement together. So Helen rewrote my existence. During our initial brief encounters with Maya and her relatives, Helen systematically introduced me as a struggling clerical worker. When a cousin asked what I did for a living, Helen interjected before I could open my mouth. She told Maya family I did data entry for a small shipping company. She patted my shoulder with feigned sympathy and praised my quiet, simple life, constructing a narrative where I was the unremarkable sibling. This allowed Liam to stand alone in the spotlight as the brilliant venture capitalist. I swallowed the insult. I played the dull, quiet sister. I wore muted colors to the bridal showers and spoke only when directly addressed, keeping my corporate identity hidden to maintain the peace. I funded the illusion they used to secure their place in elite society, while they dressed me in rags to keep the attention safely focused on Liam. It was a delicate, toxic balance that might have survived the entire wedding weekend, provided they maintained a baseline level of respect. But arrogant people rarely know when to stop pushing. Helen grew overly confident in her own lie. She began to believe the fiction she sold to the in-laws. The real war did not start with the eviction text message at the airport. It started a month earlier, during the official engagement dinner, when my mother decided to use my silence as a weapon in front of the groom's future father, setting off a chain reaction that would eventually burn her entire world to the ground. Exactly 1 month before my flight touched down in Maui, the seeds of my family's destruction were planted over a $4,000 dinner in Beverly Hills. Helen orchestrated the entire evening down to the final detail. She selected an exclusive, dimly lit steakhouse renowned for securing tables only for studio executives and inherited wealth. The private dining room featured heavy mahogany paneling, leather chairs that swallowed you whole, and a dedicated waitstaff moving like shadows along the perimeter. Helen chose this specific venue for a singular reason. She needed to project an aura of effortless prosperity to Maya's father, Marcus, masking the financial decay rotting beneath our family name. Marcus commanded the room without ever raising his voice. He wore a charcoal suit that spoke of bespoke tailoring, his demeanor calm, observant, and impossible to rattle. Maya sat beside Liam, her hand resting gracefully over his, radiating a genuine, unfiltered joy. She looked stunning, entirely unaware that she was marrying into a fragile house of cards ready to collapse under a strong breeze. Across from them sat my mother, radiating a frantic, nervous energy that she attempted to disguise as high society charm. Helen spent the first 90 minutes dominating the airspace. She delivered a manicured, relentless monologues about Liam's supposed business conquests. She spun elaborate tales of venture capital meetings and tech acquisitions, deploying industry buzzwords she barely understood with reckless abandon. Liam played his part beautifully, though his costume harbored fatal flaws if you possessed the eye to spot them. He wore a suit he claimed was custom-tailored in Milan, but the tension across the shoulders betrayed a mass-market rack purchase. A heavy, silver watch sat on his wrist, a convincing replica he bought online to project liquid wealth. He sat back in his chair, swirling a vintage Cabernet, offering vague, modest nods whenever Helen exaggerated his achievements. He looked the part of a brooding visionary, resting after a long day of conquering the market, when in reality, he had spent the afternoon dodging aggressive calls from debt collectors. I sat at the far end of the table, near the serving station, intentionally placing myself on the fringe. I wore a tailored black blazer, keeping my posture neutral, watching the performance unfold. I am accustomed to observing. In my line of work, reading a room is a fundamental survival skill. Marcus is a man who notices the margins. He possesses a sharp, analytical mind, and I could see him quietly cataloging the inconsistencies in Helen's frantic bragging. Between the salad course and the arrival of the entrees, his gaze shifted down the long table and landed directly on me. He folded his hands over his plate, projecting a warm, sincere interest that contrasted sharply with my mother's theatrics. "Chloe," he began, his rich baritone voice cutting through my mother's endless chatter. "We have heard an extensive amount regarding Liam's endeavors tonight, but you have been remarkably quiet. Maya mentioned you work in the hospitality sector. What exactly is your role?" The temperature in the private room seemed to plummet instantly. Before my vocal cords could even form a syllable to answer him, Helen lunged into the silence. She physically leaned across the table, her hand waving dismissively in my direction, treating my existence like a minor spill she needed to wipe away before it stained the pristine tablecloth. "Oh, Marcus? Chloe just handles minor paperwork." She laughed. The sound was high, brittle, and echoed awkwardly off the mahogany walls. "She files documents and answers phones for a local event planner. Liam is the true financial brain of our family. He possesses the vision. Chloe prefers to stay in the background, where it is less demanding." I felt the insult strike my chest like a physical blow. The chief executive officer of a nationwide luxury management firm, reduced to a struggling receptionist by her own mother, simply to elevate a son drowning in unsecured debt. I looked across the table. Maya shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her brow furrowed, a fleeting shadow of unease crossing her elegant features. Maya possesses a refined emotional intelligence. She instantly recognized the unprovoked cruelty laced into my mother's casual dismissal. She opened her mouth, leaning forward slightly, preparing to defend me or question the harshness of the remark. I caught Maya's eye and offered a microscopic shake of my head. I looked at her diamond engagement ring, catching the ambient candlelight. I saw the promise of a future she believed was safe and secure. I refused to detonate a truth bomb in the middle of her celebration. I could have pulled out my embossed business card. I could have listed the Fortune 500 clients I serviced that very week. I could have burned my mother's pathetic lie to ash, right there over the artisan appetizers. Instead, I swallowed the humiliation whole. I took a slow sip of my sparkling water and offered Marcus a polite, vacant smile. "Just paperwork," I echoed, letting the fiction stand. I accepted the role of the invisible ghost, prioritizing a stranger's peace over my own pride. The evening wore on, fueled by my forced silence. Helen ordered a third bottle of vintage Bordeaux, emboldened by her perceived victory over my identity. Liam ordered a reserve Wagyu tomahawk steak, indulging in premium luxury he had no right to consume. They feasted on the illusion of grandeur, tearing into expensive meat while maintaining their hollow facade. Then, the inevitable reality check arrived to disrupt the fantasy. The waiter, a man who possessed the practiced discretion of someone used to serving billionaires, approached our section quietly. He placed a sleek, black leather folio squarely in the center of the table, the subtle thud echoing louder than a siren in my ears. The dynamic shifted with brutal speed. The confident venture capitalist vanished into thin air. Liam suddenly became intensely interested in a blank screen on his smartphone, his thumbs swiping aimlessly, his posture shrinking deeply into the leather upholstery. Helen turned her attention to the floral centerpiece, admiring the white orchids with a sudden, manic fascination, actively avoiding eye contact with anyone holding a menu. A deafening, awkward silence stretched over our side of the table, thick and suffocating. Marcus reached toward his jacket pocket, fully prepared to cover the gathering, demonstrating the grace and class my family fundamentally lacked. I intercepted his motion. I slid the leather folio toward my plate with a quiet, deliberate movement. I opened the cover. $4,200. A sum that would have triggered an immediate fraud alert on Liam's overdrawn checking account. I slipped my heavy metal corporate card into the sleeve. Marcus watched this transaction closely. His intelligent eyes tracked the black card as it left my hand. He knew precisely what that specific tier of credit required regarding annual revenue and liquid assets. I saw the gears turning in his head, struggling to reconcile the image of a struggling clerical worker with a woman casually dropping $4,000 on a Thursday night dinner without a flinch or a sigh. I handed the folio back to the waiter without breaking eye contact with my brother. Liam looked up, offered a tight, acknowledging nod that contained zero genuine gratitude, and immediately returned to his conversation with Marcus about a fictional commercial real estate acquisition in Austin. I sat there in the dim light, signing the merchant receipt, financing the very dinner where my own flesh and blood had publicly stripped me of my dignity. I believed my restraint demonstrated maturity. I thought keeping the peace would earn me a baseline level of familial tolerance. I assumed shielding Maya from the ugly truth was the noble, righteous choice. I was entirely wrong. My silence did not purchase their respect. It bought their unchecked audacity. By swallowing their blatant disrespect and quietly processing their exorbitant debts, I signaled to Helen and Liam that I was a creature devoid of boundaries. I proved I was nothing more than a limitless resource, a silent machine designed to absorb their shame, fund their delusions, and disappear on command. They walked out of that restaurant into the crisp Beverly Hills night, the valet bringing around Liam's leased Porsche, firmly believing I lacked a spine. They thought my restraint was pure cowardice. That fatal miscalculation planted the seed for their ultimate destruction. The dinner was merely a test run for their cruelty. They assumed they could push me into the shadows indefinitely, treating me as a mindless asset to be exploited in private and hidden away in public. They had no idea that their arrogant assumptions were about to leave a permanent digital trail. The real treachery arrived a few weeks later, hiding in plain sight, buried within a carelessly forwarded email chain that would force me to stop playing the silent victim and start playing the executioner. Thursday morning arrived bathed in the crisp, golden light of the California sun, precisely 36 hours before the rehearsal dinner was scheduled to commence. I sat in my corner office, 30 floors above the waking city, nursing a cup of black coffee. My dual monitors glowed with spreadsheets, seating charts, and vendor manifests. I was personally managing the logistical supply chain for a lavish wedding I was barely permitted to attend. The irony tasted bitter, but I had grown accustomed to swallowing it. My cell phone vibrated against the glass desk. A banking notification illuminated the screen, confirming an automatic transfer of $4,500. It was the monthly rent payment for a trendy, exposed brick loft in the downtown arts district, Liam's loft. I co-signed that lease 3 years ago when his inaugural tech startup imploded, leaving him facing imminent eviction and a ruined credit score. I paid his rent. I covered his premium car insurance. I funded his lifestyle. I kept a stylized roof over his head while he paraded around the city, pretending to conquer the venture capital world. I silenced the notification and turned my attention back to the Malibu estate contracts. Then, a second notification pinged. This one did not originate from my bank. It was an automated message from the proprietary event management software I mandate all my contracted venues use. Liam, attempting to micromanage the seating arrangements, decided to bypass the official wedding planner and email the venue coordinator directly. He possesses zero administrative discipline. In his frantic haste to alter the floor plan late at night, he hit reply all on an older, buried email chain. He failed to notice my corporate email address lingering quietly in the carbon copy line. I clicked open the message. The subject line read, "Urgent VIP seating adjustments." I scrolled past his formal instructions to the venue staff and found the original conversation history. It was a private exchange between my brother and my mother, time-stamped at 2 a.m. People who orchestrate elaborate lies often do their most frantic work in the dead of night. I read Liam's initial message to Helen. "Mom, you have to ensure Chloe does not cross the threshold of the VIP welcome reception on Friday night. I am moving her seat to table 14. She will be stationed near the kitchen doors, sandwiched between the hired camera crew and the makeup artists. Keep her pinned there." My eyes tracked across the screen, absorbing the words, letting the initial sting register before reading further. The text grew more malicious with every sentence. If Maya's family gets stuck interacting with her, the entire weekend is compromised. Liam wrote, "That Atlanta dynasty expects elegance. They expect high society charm. If they see Chloe in her plain, rigid clothes, and hear her dry, corporate way of talking, they will judge me. She lacks class. Mom, we need to hide her. She is a liability to my image." I scrolled down to read Helen's response. It arrived 10 minutes after his panicked directive. "Do not worry. Sweetie," she typed, "I have a strategy. I will tell her the dress code changed at the last minute, and she needs to assist the caterers with arranging the floral centerpieces in the back. I will keep her out of sight until the main toast. Just focus on impressing Marcus and his partners. I will handle your sister. I stopped reading. I released the mouse and sat back in my ergonomic leather chair. I did not hurl my coffee mug against the floor-to-ceiling window. I did not shed a single tear of betrayal. A profound, freezing silence settled deep inside my chest. The temperature in my office felt as though it plummeted, chilling the air in my lungs. The residual anger, the lingering, pathetic hope I harbored that my family might eventually respect my contributions, simply evaporated into nothing. The frustration vanished, replaced by a terrifying, crystalline clarity. I looked at the glowing screen. The sheer audacity was almost artistic in its cruelty. The man currently utilizing my premium titanium card to secure imported truffles. The man sleeping in a loft protected by my pristine financial reputation was actively strategizing to conceal me like a wine stain on a tailored tuxedo. He feared my plain clothes. He feared my dry way of talking. My plain clothes consist of custom-woven, tailored suits that cost significantly more than the leased sports car he drives. My dry way of talking is the exact, measured cadence I use to negotiate multi-million-dollar logistics contracts with foreign dignitaries and hospitality moguls. I do not dress in flashy, recognizable logos because true wealth prefers to whisper. My brother dresses in counterfeit luxury and rented prestige because he is screaming for validation. I sat in the quiet hum of the skyscraper and dissected the psychology of his email. Liam did not hide me because I was embarrassing. He hid me because Marcus, a self-made real estate titan, possesses the discerning eye of a predator. If Marcus spent 5 minutes conversing with me, he would instantly recognize a peer. He would hear the language of genuine business, the quiet confidence of a woman who built an empire from a cramped apartment. Marcus would respect me, and Liam knew, deep within his hollow core, that my authentic success would cast a blinding light on his profound failure. I was not a liability to his image. I was a threat to his illusion. The epiphany washed over me, cold and sobering. Helen and Liam did not view me as a human being. They did not view me as a daughter or a sister. To my own blood, my existence was reduced to a mere utility. I was a bank vault with a pulse. I was a disposable tool, useful only for extracting capital, absorbing their deep-seated shame, and paving the road for their social climbing. They believed that once my credit card cleared the terminal at the Malibu estate, my value expired, and I must be discarded into the shadows near the kitchen doors. I looked down at my hands resting on the desk. These hands reviewed cash flow projections at 3 a.m, while Liam partied in exclusive sections he could not afford. These hands built a safety net so wide and thick that my family never had to feel the harsh concrete of consequence. I spent a decade attempting to purchase their love with unyielding generosity. I operated under the tragic delusion that financial rescue commanded emotional loyalty. The illusion shattered, leaving behind sharp, undeniable facts. I read the email thread a 4th time. Table 14, next to the kitchen. Hidden away so I do not taint the fake venture capitalist's grand premiere. He wanted to impress a family of seasoned, generational billionaires by playing a role he lacked the stamina to sustain. He thought hiding me would protect his fragile, unearned ego. He failed to understand that his ego was already standing on a trap door, and my hand rested firmly on the lever. I closed the email application. I opened a new tab and accessed the master vendor contract for the Malibu cliffside estate. I scrolled past the catering menus and the floral arrangements. I bypassed the valet schedules and the security protocols. I navigated directly to the cancellation clauses and the liability frameworks. I read the penalty structures outlined in stark black and white text. I realized in that moment that I was done arguing. You cannot use logic to negotiate with parasites. You cannot beg a leech for empathy or demand respect from people who view your dignity as a currency they can spend. You can only sever the connection. Step away and watch them wither under the weight of their own design. The days of playing the silent, supportive sister ended the second I read the words, Table 14. I picked up my cell phone from the desk. Before I executed the fatal blow, before I dismantled his dream wedding down to the studs and exposed the rot beneath the floorboards, I needed to confirm the depths of their delusion. I needed to give them one final, undeniable opportunity to step back from the edge of the cliff. I dialed Helen's number. I was going to read her own malicious words back to her. I was going to push the confrontation out of the shadows and listen to her voice when she realized the invisible safety net she relied on had just caught fire. I picked up my phone and dialed my mother. I did not pause to process the betrayal. I did not afford myself the luxury of a deep breath. In the corporate world, when you uncover a hostile takeover, you do not retreat to gather your feelings. You confront the board. The line rang twice before Helen answered. Background noise filtered through the speaker. A chaotic blend of classical music and a tailor barking orders. She was likely at her final dress fitting, surrounded by imported silk she could not afford. "Hello, darling," Helen answered. Her voice dripped with an artificial, sugary warmth that made my stomach turn. "Have you transferred the funds for the rehearsal dinner floral arrangements yet? The vendor is being rather stubborn about his delivery schedule." I did not offer a greeting. I did not acknowledge her question. I simply read the email. "Mom, you have to ensure Chloe does not cross the threshold of the VIP welcome reception on Friday night. I am moving her seat to table 14. She will be stationed near the kitchen doors." I kept my voice clinical. I read Liam's exact words, articulating every syllable with deliberate precision, stripping away any emotion. I read his fear of my plain clothes. I read his critique of my dry way of talking. I read his explicit instruction to hide me like a liability so he could impress an Atlanta real estate dynasty. The background noise on Helen's end of the call abruptly ceased. I heard a door close. She had stepped out of the fitting room, seeking privacy to manage the impending crisis. A normal parent caught orchestrating a malicious plot against their own child would exhibit shame. A normal parent would stammer, apologize, and attempt to beg for forgiveness. Helen is not a normal parent. She is a veteran manipulator who treats accountability as an insult. "Chloe, you are overreacting." She sighed. Her tone shifted instantly from sugary warmth to exhausted condescension. The speed of her pivot was almost impressive. "You always do this. You take a fragmented piece of information and blow it out of proportion just to create drama. I forwarded the entire thread to your personal email 10 seconds ago." I replied. "It is not fragmented. It is a detailed, time-stamped strategy session between you and my brother outlining how to hide the woman financing your facade." Helen adopted her most patient, patronizing voice. The voice she used when I was a child, requesting something she deemed unreasonable. "You need to understand the pressure Liam is under. Maya's family operates on a different level. They are like royalty in the South. They expect a certain aesthetic, a certain flawless presentation. We must save face." She paused, allowing her words to settle, calculating her next strike. "You have to admit, Chloe, you can be incredibly rigid. You treat every social interaction like a hostile negotiation. You do not know how to mingle with high society. You refuse to wear the designer gowns I suggest. You wear those stiff suits. We just thought you would be more comfortable in the back, away from the spotlight. I am only looking out for you. I want to protect you from feeling out of place." The audacity was breathtaking. She attempted to package my banishment as an act of maternal charity. She claimed my corporate demeanor was a flaw, entirely ignoring the reality that my rigid, professional execution was the sole reason she was not currently facing bankruptcy. "I do not feel out of place in high society." "Mom," I countered. "My firm orchestrated a summit for European tech executives last month. I dine with venture capitalists who possess actual portfolios, not just counterfeit watches and leased cars. You are not protecting me. You are protecting Liam's fragile ego because he knows he is a fraud. Helen gasped. A sharp, theatrical intake of breath designed to signal her profound injury. How dare you speak about your brother that way? He is trying to build a future. I am demanding basic respect, I said, cutting through her performance. I am the sole guarantor of this wedding. I expect to be seated with my family. I expect to be treated as a guest of honor, not a secret to be shoved behind the kitchen doors. If you cannot provide that minimum standard of decency, we have a serious problem. Helen deployed her final, most toxic weapon, the victim card. It is always about money with you. Chloe, she sneered, her voice trembling with manufactured grief. You wield your bank account like a weapon to control us. You are so jealous of your brother's happiness that you are willing to sabotage his wedding over a seating chart. You cannot stand the fact that he found someone incredible while you sit alone in your glass office. She did not wait for my response. She hung up. The line went dead, leaving me in the quiet hum of my skyscraper. I knew exactly what would happen next. Helen operates through proxies. She would immediately call Liam. She would paint a tragic picture of our conversation, twisting my demand for respect into an unhinged, jealous threat. She would convince him that his bitter older sister was plotting to ruin his pristine image in front of his wealthy bride. She would stoke his paranoia until he felt cornered, forcing him to take drastic, preemptive action to secure his fantasy. I spent the rest of the day reviewing quarterly reports and ignoring the subtle tension gathering in my shoulders. The sun dipped below the Los Angeles skyline, casting long, golden shadows across my desk. I waited for the inevitable retaliation. It arrived precisely at 8 o'clock that evening. My phone screen illuminated with a text message from Liam. He did not call. Cowards rarely deliver their ultimatums out loud. The message was brief, cold, and dripping with unearned arrogance. Do not bother coming to the wedding. Maya's family expects a certain caliber of guests, and you simply do not fit the aesthetic. I will tell them you caught a severe flu. Do not make this difficult. I stared at the glowing text. Liam believed he had just delivered a fatal blow to my pride. In his distorted reality, he thought the greatest privilege on earth was proximity to his fake success. He assumed I was desperate for a seat at his table. He imagined I would read that message and break down in tears, devastated by my exclusion from the royal event. He expected me to reply with frantic apologies, begging for a chance to wear a bridesmaid dress, promising to sit silently in the corner just to be allowed inside the gates. He thought revoking my invitation was the ultimate punishment. He thought he was closing the door on me. He entirely forgot the mechanics of the door itself. Liam was blinded by his own narcissism. He was so focused on curating his flawless billionaire aesthetic that he failed to comprehend the legal reality of the paperwork holding his illusion together. When I secured the Malibu cliffside estate, I did not merely hand over a credit card number. High-end luxury venues do not operate on blind trust. They cater to celebrities, foreign dignitaries, and high-net-worth individuals. They utilize ironclad fraud prevention protocols to protect their assets. The contract stipulated a massive initial deposit, which I had cleared months ago. However, the remaining 50% of the six-figure rental fee was scheduled to be processed exactly 24 hours before the rehearsal dinner commenced. That payment was the final key to unlock the property. The venue management required a strict, non-negotiable verification process for that final transaction. They do not run the card on file automatically. The primary cardholder must be physically present on the property. The cardholder must present the physical credit card, alongside a matching, government-issued identification, to a senior venue director. If the primary guarantor fails to appear in person 24 hours before the event, the contract mandates an automatic security freeze. The gates lock. The vendors are denied entry. The power grid to the event spaces is shut down. Every single service is suspended instantly to prevent credit card fraud. Liam banished me. He ordered me to stay away from the venue. He demanded I disappear. He did not realize that by erasing my physical presence from the guest list, he just guaranteed the permanent closure of his own wedding venue. He exiled the only person on the planet holding the keys to his kingdom. I locked my phone, slid it into my pocket, and smiled into the empty office. It was time to give my brother exactly what he asked for. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone in the quiet of my 30th floor office. The text message from Liam sat there. A digital eviction notice from my own family. Most people would have reacted with immediate fury. They would have dialed his number, screamed into the receiver, and demanded an apology. They would have threatened to tear down the wedding right then and there. I did none of those things. Anger is an undisciplined emotion. And in the corporate sector, undisciplined reactions cost you capital. I operate in logistics. I solve complex problems using structured frameworks and binding ink. I woke my laptop screen and logged into the secure client portal my firm uses to manage elite vendor contracts. I navigated to the directory, holding the Malibu estate documentation. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I possessed the administrative authority to cancel the entire event with a single keystroke. Canceling, however, was a flawed strategy. A direct cancellation would trigger a strict breach of contract clause, leaving me legally responsible for a 30% penalty fee. I refused to pay a financial penalty for a disaster my brother engineered. I needed a surgical solution. I needed the system to operate exactly as designed, using their own rules to build the gallows. High net worth event spaces utilize rigorous fraud prevention protocols. They cater to foreign dignitaries, entertainment executives, and generational wealth to accommodate primary financial sponsors who cannot physically attend their sponsored events. These venues offer a specific legal bypass known as an absentee authorization waiver. This document allows the guarantor to submit a verified digital signature, a scanned government identification, and a recorded video statement releasing the venue to charge the card on file without a physical presence. I had drafted this exact waiver 3 days ago, anticipating my demanding work schedule. It sat in the pending folder on the portal, waiting for my final digital seal. I clicked on the pending file. I did not sign it. I hit the delete icon. A prompt appeared on the screen, asking me to confirm the removal of the authorization waiver. I clicked confirm. The portal refreshed. The security parameters instantly reverted to their default, uncompromising settings. The venue software now required a physical body, a physical titanium credit card, and a matching driver license presented on-site exactly 24 hours before the rehearsal dinner commenced. Without Chloe in the room, the automated gates remain locked. The floral trucks do not unload. The catering staff is barred from entering the kitchens. The security detail denies entry to everyone, including the groom. I closed the laptop. The satisfying click of the metal hinge echoed in the silent office. I had not sabotaged his wedding. I merely complied with his explicit demand. He ordered me not to show up. I was simply honoring the groom request to the exact letter of the law. I packed my briefcase, sliding my passport and credit cards into the interior pocket. I walked out of the glass suite, rode the elevator down to the subterranean parking garage, and requested a black car service. I directed the driver to Los Angeles International Airport. As the luxury sedan merged onto the sprawling freeway, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and crimson. For 10 years, I had navigated this urban grid, acting as the emergency brake for my mother and brother. I absorbed their financial collisions. I smoothed over their reckless decisions. I functioned as the invisible safety net they treated with quiet disdain. My mother, Helen, raised us in a modest suburban home, but she always stared hungrily at the gated communities across town. She ingrained in Liam the dangerous belief that appearance dictated reality. He learned to lease his confidence. I learned to earn mine. While Liam practiced his golf swing to network with local angel investors who eventually saw through his empty charm. I worked 90-hour weeks building a hospitality firm from a thrift store dining table. He cultivated a hollow facade. I cultivated tangible equity. Tonight, the difference between those two approaches was about to materialize in a spectacular fashion. Arriving at the international terminal, I bypassed the chaotic ticketing lines and walked directly to the priority desk. The agent greeted me with a practiced smile and asked for my destination. I handed her my identification and requested a change to my itinerary. The original ticket, a short domestic hop to the local airstrip near the venue, was scrapped. I booked a first-class seat on the red-eye flight direct to Maui. I paid the fare difference without a second thought. This brings us to that moment in the private airline lounge. Sitting in the leather chair with the espresso warming my hands, the marble floors gleamed under the soft ambient lighting. I watched the departures board flip through various global destinations. My phone remained silent. Helen and Liam were likely asleep, dreaming of the flawless, aristocratic performance they planned to execute over the weekend. They were resting peacefully, entirely unaware that the foundation of their grand stage had just been quietly removed. A notification chimed over the terminal speakers, announcing the boarding process for my flight. I gathered my coat and briefcase. Walking down the jet bridge, I felt a physical shift in my posture. The chronic, dull ache in my shoulders, a tension I carried for a decade, began to dissolve. I stepped onto the aircraft, found my window seat, and accepted a glass of sparkling water from the flight attendant. The heavy cabin doors sealed shut, blocking out the noise of the city. As the plane taxied down the runway and accelerated into the night sky, I looked down at the sprawling, illuminated grid of Los Angeles dropping away beneath me. Down there, in a trendy loft he did not own, my brother slept next to a woman he was actively deceiving. Down there, my mother reviewed her designer wardrobe, preparing to play the role of the wealthy matriarch. They constructed a magnificent, high-speed locomotive fueled by my capital and their deceit. They thought they could simply kick the engineer off the train while it was moving at full velocity. They failed to realize that I took the braking system with me. I reclined my seat, staring out into the dark expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The manipulation string was severed. I was free. Their machine was currently accelerating toward a sheer vertical drop. The 24-hour countdown clock had started ticking, and they did not even know the game of survival had begun. Friday morning arrived with the sound of the Pacific Ocean crashing against the volcanic rocks of the Maui coastline. I woke up in a corner suite, the kind of room that features floor-to-ceiling sliding glass doors and private lanais. The air tasted of salt and untethered freedom. I ordered a pot of premium Kona coffee from room service. I poured a cup, watching the dark liquid steam in the morning chill, and walked out onto the balcony. I glanced at the gold watch resting on my wrist. It was exactly 55 minutes past 9 in California. Back in Los Angeles, the marine layer would be burning off the Malibu cliffs. The caterers, the florists, and the event staff would be idling their commercial trucks along the Pacific Coast Highway, waiting for clearance to enter the private access road. Today was the rehearsal dinner, the grand opening act of the wedding weekend. The schedule dictated that at 10 o'clock sharp, the venue gates would unlock to allow the vendors inside to construct the luxury tents and arrange the thousands of imported white roses Helen had demanded. However, the schedule possessed a hard stop, a financial tripwire I designed intentionally. According to the ironclad vendor contract I signed months ago, the venue director required a final authorization of $45,000 to release the property for the weekend. This was not a verbal agreement. This was not a handshake deal between gentlemen. High society event management operates on militant precision and zero trust. The estate director, a man named Victor, who previously managed security for visiting diplomats, required the primary guarantor to stand in his office, present a government-issued identification, and physically insert the authorized titanium credit card into an encrypted terminal. My brother possessed none of those items. He possessed a digital photograph of my credit card. I knew exactly how he obtained that photograph. 3 weeks ago, while I was paying the tailor who altered his rehearsal dinner tuxedo, Liam stood behind me, pretending to text his groomsmen. I saw the flash reflect off the mirror. He snapped a picture of my card numbers, operating under the juvenile delusion that a low-resolution JPEG on an iPhone would be sufficient to bypass the security protocols of a world-class estate. Liam genuinely believed that rules were merely suggestions for the lower classes. He assumed his counterfeit Italian loafers and his practiced, charming smile could override any administrative obstacle. He thought he could flash the screen to a venue manager, claim his wealthy sister was delayed in traffic, and charm his way through the gates. He fundamentally misunderstood the arena he was playing in. Men like Victor do not care about your smile. They do not care about your designer suit. They care about liability. Without the physical card and my physical presence, Victor would view Liam not as a VIP client, but as a potential fraud risk. I took a slow sip of my Kona coffee. The flavor profile hit my palate perfectly. It carried a sharp, bitter edge that dissolved into a smooth, satisfying finish. It mirrored the exact sensation settling in my chest. I set the ceramic mug down on the glass patio table. My phone sat next to it, resting silently against the cool surface. The screen remained dark. No missed calls. No frantic text messages. The digital silence felt heavy, charged with the kind of static electricity that precedes a lightning strike. Let us examine the geometry of the disaster unfolding across the ocean. Marcus, the patriarch of the Atlanta dynasty, values punctuality above all other virtues. He likely arranged for a fleet of black SUVs to transport Maya and her extended relatives from their Beverly Hills hotel to the Malibu property for a morning walkthrough. They would be dressed in understated, elegant resort wear, expecting to be greeted by a poised groom and a fully operational staff offering chilled champagne. Instead, they were currently driving toward a heavily fortified wrought iron gate that refused to open. I could visualize the scene with crystal clarity. Liam was likely pacing near the guardhouse right now. He would be checking his replica watch, sweating through his custom linen shirt. Helen was probably standing next to him, clutching her designer handbag, attempting to project an air of aristocratic annoyance to mask her rising panic. They were likely berating the security guard, demanding to speak to the manager, throwing my name around like a VIP pass that had mysteriously stopped working. They still thought this was a simple miscommunication. They still believed the event software glitch could be resolved with a quick phone call to the bank. They had no idea that the system was operating flawlessly. The system was executing the exact command I left behind. 58 minutes past 9. I leaned against the balcony railing, feeling the tropical sun warm my shoulders. The contrast between my serene isolation and their impending public humiliation was intoxicating. For a decade, I absorbed their stress. I paid their debts. I managed their crises while they criticized my wardrobe and mocked my career. They utilized my capital to build a stage, and then they banished me from the theater, claiming I lacked the class to sit in the audience. They demanded I stay away. I was simply honoring their request with malicious compliance. 59 minutes past 9. The silence from my phone confirmed my theory. Liam was trying to handle it himself. He was too arrogant to call me before the deadline. Calling me would mean admitting defeat. It would mean acknowledging that the sister he exiled to Table 14 was actually the architect of his entire universe. He was probably standing in Victor's office at this very second, holding out his phone, showing the screen with my stolen card numbers. Trying to laugh off the inconvenience, I pictured Victor looking at the screen, his face an unreadable mask of corporate indifference. I pictured Victor explaining the anti-fraud protocols, pointing to the specific clause in the contract that required my physical signature. I pictured the color slowly draining from Liam's face as the reality of his situation breached the walls of his delusion. The final seconds ticked away. The ocean breeze rustled the palm fronds below my suite. The coffee in my mug grew lukewarm. The world seemed to hold its breath. This was the razor-thin margin between the illusion and the collapse. 10 o'clock flat. The deadline arrived. The financial tripwire snapped. In Malibu, the system automatically locked the reservation. The estate gates remained sealed. The vendors were legally barred from unloading a single chair. The dream wedding crashed into a concrete wall of reality. I kept my eyes on this dark screen of my phone, waiting for the shockwave to cross the Pacific. Who would break first? Who would pull the trigger and make the call? A single vibration rattled the glass table. The screen illuminated, blindingly bright in the morning shade. The bomb had detonated. The fallout was about to begin. 5 minutes past 10 in the morning. The digital clock on my phone screen shifted, and a second later, the device vibrated against the glass patio table. The screen illuminated the shaded balcony, displaying a single name in stark white letters. Liam. For 10 years, my physical response to that specific caller identification was a conditioned reflex. Whenever Liam called, a minor catastrophe was already in motion. A bounced check required covering. A towed vehicle needed retrieval. A fabricated resume needed my corporate endorsement. I spent my entire adult life answering on the first ring, trained to act as the rapid response unit for a brother who treated consequences like mild inconveniences meant for other people. Today, I sat perfectly still in my wicker chair overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I watched the phone vibrate, slowly inching across the smooth glass surface. I did not reach for it. I watched the incoming call screen time out. The display went dark, leaving nothing but the reflection of the Hawaiian sky. It felt like watching a heavy chain snap and fall away. 1 minute later, at 6 minutes past 10, the phone woke up again. This time, the caller was Helen. My mother rarely calls me during business hours, unless she needs to leverage my assets to secure a reservation she cannot afford. The fact that she was dialing my number while she was supposed to be managing a rehearsal dinner walkthrough signaled that the initial wave of reality had just crashed over their pristine Malibu beach. She was likely standing near the wrought iron gates of the estate. Realizing that her rehearsed charm was entirely ineffective against corporate liability protocols, I let her call ring until the voicemail system intercepted it. At 8 minutes past 10, the phone vibrated with a different cadence. A FaceTime request from Liam. People who operate on deceit only utilize video calls when they are desperate. They use it as a tool for visual intimidation or to force you to witness their immediate distress, hoping your guilt will override your logic. I rejected the video request instantly. While I sat in the tropical breeze, I could perfectly reconstruct the scene unfolding 3,000 miles away. The Malibu estate director, Victor, is a man who spent 2 decades running private security for high-net-worth individuals before transitioning to hospitality management. Victor does not care if you are marrying into an Atlanta real estate dynasty. He does not care about your designer tuxedo. He cares exclusively about risk mitigation. Liam had likely strutted up to the guardhouse, flashing his bright, empty smile. He probably pulled out his smartphone, opened his photo gallery, and proudly presented the blurry picture of my titanium credit card to the security personnel. He expected them to wave him through the gates with a deferential nod. Instead, security summoned Victor. I could envision Victor stepping out of the management office, looking at Liam with the cold, assessing gaze of a professional who spots a liability. Liam would have tried to escalate the situation, raising his voice, deploying his favorite tactic of feigned outrage. He would have puffed out his chest, pointed at the sprawling lawns behind the gate, and loudly proclaimed his status as the groom. In the luxury event sector, being the groom grants you a boutonniere and a designated parking spot. It does not grant you financial clearance. Victor would have delivered the verdict with chilling neutrality. Sir, this contract is legally guaranteed by Ms. Chloe. You are not listed as an authorized signer. We cannot process a digital photograph of a payment method for a 6-figure venue rental. If Ms. Chloe does not appear at this gate with her physical identification and the matching card within the next 30 minutes, we are mandated by corporate policy to secure the premises. The main gates will be locked. No vendors will be permitted entry. The rejection would have struck Liam like a physical blow. For the first time in his sheltered existence, his mother could not smooth over the obstacle, and his fake venture capitalist persona held zero currency. By 10:30, My notification center displayed 20 missed calls. 10 from Liam. 10 from Helen. A voicemail notification popped onto the screen. I unlocked the device, tapped the audio file, and brought the speaker to my ear. I wanted to hear the exact frequency of his unraveling. "Chloe, this joke is not funny anymore." Liam spoke fast, his voice high and thin, stripped of the arrogant drawl he practiced for his society friends. The background noise on the recording was chaotic. I could hear the distinct rumble of heavy diesel engines idling. The vendors were piling up on the narrow canyon road. "Where are you? The managers here are crazy. They are refusing to let the tent crew inside. The florist is threatening to leave. Maya family is going to be here in 2 hours for the walkthrough. Stop ignoring my calls. Bring the card here, right now. We need you to fix this." He did not apologize for banishing me. He did not express remorse for the malicious email thread where he plotted to hide me near the kitchen doors. Even while standing on the precipice of total public humiliation, Liam still viewed me as a subordinate employee whose sole purpose was to resolve his logistical failures. He genuinely believed I was sitting in my Los Angeles apartment, pouting over his text message, waiting for him to summon me back into his good graces. He demanded I bring the card. He ordered me to fix it. I lowered the phone and smiled. A genuine, unrestrained smile that reached my eyes. I opened my device settings and switched the phone to silent mode, disabling the vibration feature entirely. The screen could light up all day, but it would not disturb my peace. I stood up from the patio chair, walked into the luxurious bedroom, and slipped into my swimwear. I grabbed a hotel towel, a pair of dark sunglasses, and my room key. I left the suite and walked down the open-air corridors toward the resort infinity pool. The Hawaiian sun warmed the stone pathways beneath my feet. The air smelled of plumeria and salt. I found an empty lounge chair facing the ocean, ordered a fresh fruit cocktail from a passing attendant, and settled into the cushions. Liam explicitly told me not to bother coming to his wedding. He stated clearly that my presence did not fit his refined aesthetic. I was simply following the groom instructions to the absolute letter. He gifted me this sudden vacation by revoking my invitation, and I fully intended to enjoy the generous present. As I stretched out under the sun, I calculated the timeline. The 30-minute grace period Victor offered was rapidly evaporating. In a few short minutes, the venue security would slide the heavy iron gates shut and engage the deadbolts. The logistical traffic jam on the Pacific Coast Highway was about to escalate from a minor delay into a full-scale commercial dispute. Dozens of caterers, lighting technicians, and florists were currently sitting in their idling trucks, realizing they were not getting paid for their morning labor. Soon, those vendors would start demanding answers. They would corner Helen and Liam, demanding financial compensation for the wasted day. The localized panic was about to spread, infecting the entire supply chain. More importantly, Marcus and his meticulous Atlanta relatives were currently enjoying their morning coffee in Beverly Hills, preparing to board their chartered vehicles. They were expecting a seamless, flawlessly executed welcome reception. They were expecting to arrive at a pristine estate ready to celebrate a union of equals. Instead, they were driving straight toward a barricaded fortress, surrounded by angry contractors and a groom who could not even afford to open the front door. The first wave of reality had hit the beach, but the tsunami was still building just off the coast, and Helen was about to realize that her beloved son was completely incapable of swimming. By 12 o'clock noon, Pacific Standard Time, the tropical sun sat directly above my lounge chair in Maui, casting sharp, pristine shadows across the pool deck. I ordered a second plate of fresh fruit and finally reached for my phone, which had been resting face down on the small table beside me. I tapped the glass screen. The notification center displayed a staggering 55 missed calls. The sheer volume of digital panic painted a vivid picture of the cascading disaster unfolding on the California coast. The domino effect had officially begun, and it was tearing through their carefully constructed illusion with the precision of a controlled demolition. To understand the nature of a high-tier event collapse, You must understand the vendor ecosystem that supports it. Elite weddings in Los Angeles do not operate in isolated bubbles. The industry is a tight, interconnected web of professionals who communicate constantly. When the primary venue director, Victor, dropped the heavy iron gates of the Malibu estate and engaged the electronic deadbolts, he sent an immediate, silent signal to every other contractor on the manifest. A locked venue gate means the financial foundation of the event is compromised. In the luxury service sector, contractors have been burned too many times by fake socialites and fraudulent credit cards. They rely on strict delivery manifests. When they smell risk, they halt all operations until the primary guarantor signs the release forms. The backup began on the narrow, winding canyon road leading up to the estate. The premier floral design company, hired to construct elaborate arches and table centerpieces, arrived with 3 climate-controlled box trucks. The invoice for the floral arrangements alone rivaled the down payment on a modest house. The lead designer stared at the locked gates, listened to Liam spout frantic excuses about banking errors, and promptly refused to lower the hydraulic lifts. 10,000 imported white roses sat idling in the dark cargo bays. Once those delicate stems are cut and exposed to the sweltering Southern California heat, they cannot be returned or resold. The florist demanded my physical signature on the delivery liability waiver before a single petal left the truck. Liam offered to sign his own name. The designer looked at his cheap replica watch, checked the official contract listing my name as the sole financial sponsor, and shook his head. The logistical gridlock compounded minutes later when the premium beverage supplier arrived. This was not a standard catering drop-off. This was a highly secured transport containing crates of vintage champagne, rare imported spirits, and top-tier wine varietals carefully selected to impress Maya's affluent relatives. Alcohol distribution at this level requires the legal cardholder to present matching identification to accept the liability transfer. The delivery coordinator informed Liam that without my direct physical presence to authorize the receipt, the trucks would be turning around and returning the inventory to their temperature-controlled vaults in Beverly Hills. I unlocked my phone and accessed my voicemail inbox. The audio files stacked up like a chronological record of a psychological breakdown. I pressed play on the most recent messages, bringing the speaker close to my ear, listening to the destruction of my mother's aristocratic persona. The earlier messages from Helen were steeped in her usual commanding arrogance. She ordered me to stop playing games, demanding I drive to the venue and fix the administrative error I supposedly caused. But as the morning dragged on and the reality of the locked gates set in, her tone fractured. The arrogance dissolved, replaced by a shrill, breathless panic. I listened to a voicemail timestamped at 11:45. "Chloe, you have to answer the phone, right now," Helen shrieked, the ambient noise of revving truck engines drowning out her background. "They are holding the champagne hostage. The floral director is threatening to leave. Maya's family is arriving in less than an hour. Do you want to kill me? Do you want to give me a heart attack right here on the pavement? Give in! I beg you. Just bring the card." I pictured Helen standing on the dusty shoulder of the canyon road. She spent weeks curating her wardrobe for this specific afternoon, ultimately selecting a slate gray, designer silk sheath dress that cost upward of $3,000. She intended to wear it while sipping sparkling water on a manicured lawn, projecting the image of a serene, generational matriarch welcoming the Atlanta real estate dynasty to her domain. Instead, she was trapped on the hot asphalt, baking under the midday sun. Silk is a notoriously unforgiving fabric. I knew with absolute certainty that she was sweating through the back of that expensive dress, the pristine fabric clinging to her skin, her meticulous makeup melting as she haggled with unimpressed delivery drivers. She was experiencing the physical manifestation of losing face. For Helen, social standing was oxygen. She could tolerate crushing debt. She could tolerate a mountain of lies. But being exposed as a fraud in front of high society was a fate worse than death. The empire of deceit she spent years building The narrative she carefully crafted to elevate Liam into a financial prodigy was currently crumbling to dust. And the most agonizing part of her downfall was the bitter irony causing it. The entire operation was collapsing simply because it lacked a single signature from the woman they had deemed too low class to attend. They told Maya's family I was a lowly typist. They plotted in secret to hide me behind the kitchen doors, terrified my rigid corporate demeanor would taint their flawless aesthetic. Yet, without the typist present, the gates remained bolted shut. Without the embarrassment of a sister, the vintage champagne stayed locked in the trucks. The people who viewed me as a disposable bank vault were now realizing that the vault was the only thing holding up their fragile ceiling. The conflict was no longer about money. The credit card limit was irrelevant now. The crisis had mutated into a desperate fight for social survival. Liam was standing in front of a dozen working professionals, men and women who read binding contracts for a living, trying to deploy a charm that only worked on gullible investors. He was failing spectacularly. He was being treated like a trespasser at his own wedding. I set my phone back down on the glass table, feeling the gentle ocean breeze sweep across the lanai. The desperation in Helen's voice was the currency she owed me for a decade of financial exploitation. I took a piece of fresh pineapple from the plate, savoring the bright, sharp flavor. They believed they could orchestrate my banishment and enjoy the fruits of my labor simultaneously. They were currently learning the harsh physics of consequence. You cannot sever the roots of a tree and expect the branches to keep providing shade. The timeline was narrowing with brutal speed. Helen mentioned in her frantic voicemail that Maya's family was arriving soon. Marcus, the pragmatic patriarch of the Atlanta dynasty, does not tolerate delays or logistical incompetence. He operates on precision. He would have orchestrated a fleet of black, premium SUVs to transport his daughter and his extended relatives from their luxury hotel directly to the Malibu cliffs. They were currently rolling down the Pacific Coast Highway, expecting to be greeted by open gates, polished staff, and a flawless welcome reception. They were expecting a coronation. They were about to step into a war zone. I leaned back in the lounge chair and closed my eyes, listening to the rhythmic crash of the Hawaiian waves. The tension on the mainland was reaching its boiling point. I knew the exact moment Marcus ordered his driver to turn onto the private canyon road. The illusion would shatter beyond repair. The old money bride was about to collide with the fraudulent groom, and there was not a single thing Liam could do to stop the impact. The inherent flaw in deceiving highly intelligent people is that they do not require a tearful confession to spot a lie. They merely need to observe the structural inconsistencies. Maya makes her living in high-stakes corporate litigation. She spends her weeks in pristine Atlanta boardrooms, deposing hostile witnesses and dismantling fraudulent financial disclosures. She dissects human behavior for sport. When a chief executive officer attempts to hide a toxic asset during a corporate merger, Maya finds the discrepancy in their posture before she even reads the balance sheet. She was trained by her father, Marcus, a man who built a real estate dynasty by trusting his instincts and verifying every single claim. Liam believed he could outsmart a family of apex predators using the tactics of a street corner hustler. He was about to learn a devastating lesson in predator dynamics. The caravan of black, chauffeured sport utility vehicles carrying the bride and her extended relatives wound its way up the coastal canyon road. They expected to glide through the wrought iron gates of the Malibu estate and step onto manicured lawns overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Instead, the lead vehicle decelerated sharply, forced to navigate around a chaotic bottleneck of commercial delivery trucks parked haphazardly along the dusty shoulder. Maya stepped out of the climate-controlled cabin into the stifling midday heat. She did not immediately demand answers. She stood by the open car door and surveyed the scene with the cold, assessing gaze of a litigator evaluating a crime scene. She noted the floral design crew sitting on the bumpers of their box trucks, their arms folded in unified defiance. She observed the premium beverage suppliers leaning against their locked cargo bays, checking their watches with visible irritation. Her eyes tracked toward the guardhouse. Liam was pacing frantically on the asphalt. His face flushed a deep, unhealthy crimson. He was gesturing wildly, yelling into a cell phone that was undoubtedly ringing my silenced line in Hawaii. A few feet away, Helen hovered in a state of visible distress. The slate gray designer silk dress she selected to project generational wealth was failing her. The fabric clung awkwardly to her spine, darkened by sweat. She was fanning herself with a glossy venue brochure, her meticulous makeup melting under the harsh California sun. Maya approached the barricade. Her stride was even, her posture impeccable. She wore a simple, elegant ivory sundress, projecting a serene authority that stood in stark contrast to the frantic energy radiating from my brother. Marcus flanked her, silent and observant, his hands clasped behind his back. Liam, what exactly is happening here? Maya asked. Her voice was level, precise, and devoid of panic. It was a surgical instrument probing a wound. Liam pivoted at the sound of her voice. Fear flooded his eyes, wide and terrified. Like a cornered animal realizing the trap had sprung, he desperately attempted to deploy his venture capitalist charm. A tactic that felt jarringly out of place against the backdrop of idling diesel engines and locked gates. He straightened his linen jacket, forcing a bright, brittle smile that failed to reach his eyes. A minor administrative glitch, he claimed. His voice pitched an octave higher than its usual practiced baritone. He pointed a trembling finger toward the estate entrance. Chloe has a new administrative assistant who bungled a routine wire transfer for the final venue deposit. I am actively rectifying the situation. We will be inside shortly. It was a pathetic, transparent fabrication. Maya knew it instantly. Her gaze flicked from his panicked eyes to the heavy iron deadbolts securing the property. She processed the sheer scale of the logistical freeze. A minor banking error does not cause elite vendors to halt operations and refuse entry. A simple wire transfer delay does not cause a venue to lock out a groom on the eve of his wedding. Liam made a fatal miscalculation. He chose to lie in front of a man who valued facts over fiction. A man who possessed zero incentive to protect the groom and his fragile ego. Victor, the estate director, stood merely 3 feet away on the opposite side of the iron gate. Victor operates within the highest echelons of Los Angeles hospitality. He spent 20 years running private security for high-net-worth individuals before transitioning to estate management. He knows exactly who I am. My luxury event firm channels millions of dollars through properties just like his every fiscal quarter. He respects my operations. He does not tolerate being utilized as a convenient scapegoat in a domestic dispute, especially when it challenges his professional integrity. Victor stepped forward, placing his hands on the iron bars separating him from the chaotic street. He addressed the bride directly, bypassing the frantic groom entirely. I apologize for the inconvenience. Ms. Maya, Victor stated, his tone polite but rigidly corporate. However, there is no administrative assistant involved in this transaction. Furthermore, we do not accept wire transfers for final day of clearances under any circumstances. Victor paused, ensuring his next words carried the necessary weight. If Ms. Chloe, the sole financial sponsor and legal guarantor of this entire event, does not physically present her identification and her payment method at this gate, we are legally mandated by corporate policy to keep this property secured. There is no clerical error here. We are simply waiting for the client who holds the contract. The phrase sole financial sponsor hung in the heavy, dry canyon air, echoing louder than the idling trucks. Maya blinked. A micro-expression of profound realization washed over her elegant features. The gears of her legal mind turned, processing the terminology instantly. A typist does not act as the sole financial sponsor for a 6-figure weekend rental. A lowly clerical worker does not guarantee liability for an elite cliffside estate. The carefully constructed narrative Helen and Liam spent months weaving began to fracture in real time, the cracks spreading rapidly across the surface of their deception. Marcus, standing slightly behind his daughter, narrowed his eyes. He looked at Liam, then at the locked gate, then at the venue director. He evaluated the cheap replica watch on Liam's wrist, the sweat staining his collar, the desperate, hollow look in his eyes. The aura of the brilliant tech entrepreneur shattered instantly, revealing nothing more than a desperate man locked out of a party he could not afford to host. Helen let out a small, strangled gasp. She stepped forward, attempting to intervene, her hands fluttering nervously. "Maya? Darling, please do not listen to this man. There is just a misunderstanding with the accounts. Liam has plenty of capital. He just needs to access the right portfolio." Maya did not look at Helen. She did not acknowledge the frantic mother. She kept her analytical gaze locked firmly on the pale groom. The silence stretched between them, suffocating and tense, drowning out the ambient noise of the Pacific Coast Highway. Maya took a slow, deliberate breath. The polite, accommodating bride vanished, replaced by the ruthless corporate litigator preparing to dismantle a hostile witness. She stepped closer to Liam, her eyes cold and unyielding, and asked a second, far more dangerous question, demanding the one thing my brother could no longer afford to provide. Friday evening descended upon the California coast, painting the sky in deep shades of bruised purple and gold. Instead of savoring seared Wagyu beef and butter-poached lobster on a Malibu cliffside, the esteemed guests from Atlanta found themselves sitting in the lobby of their Beverly Hills hotel. Cardboard delivery boxes stacked haphazardly on a mahogany coffee table replaced the anticipated fine china and crystal glassware. The heavy aroma of pepperoni and garlic knots overwhelmed the signature floral scent of the luxury hotel atrium. On my private balcony in Maui, my phone counter silently ticked upward in the background. 56 missed calls. 62. 75. By 8 o'clock. The notification badge displayed 90 frantic attempts to reach me. The digital barrage was the only indicator I required to confirm that the extravagant rehearsal dinner had been officially pronounced dead on arrival. Inside that sprawling hotel lobby, the tension was thick enough to suffocate a person. Maya and her extended family, dressed impeccably in tailored silk evening wear and custom suits, ate pizza slices in stunned silence. They possessed the grace to refrain from open complaints, but their rigid posture communicated volumes. This was a dynasty that valued flawless execution, punctuality, and unwavering competence. They were currently witnessing an unprecedented logistical failure, a chaotic mess that directly contradicted the sophisticated image my brother projected. In the center of this suffocating atmosphere stood my mother and brother. Liam paced the Persian rug, his custom linen suit now wrinkled and stained with nervous sweat. He looked less like a tech visionary on the eve of his high society wedding and more like a panicked teenager caught joyriding a stolen vehicle. Marcus watched the frantic pacing from a tufted leather wingback chair. My father did not build a lucrative commercial real estate portfolio by tolerating ambiguity or excusing incompetence. He is a man who dismantles complex zoning disputes before finishing his morning coffee. He does not allow anyone to lead him by the nose. He wiped his hands deliberately with a linen napkin, set his slice of pizza back into the cardboard box, and cleared his throat. That single, quiet sound acted like a wooden gavel, striking a sounding block. The hushed conversations among the relatives ceased instantly. Liam froze mid-step. Helen stiffened, her eyes darting around the room, desperately searching for an escape route that simply did not exist. Marcus folded his hands over his knee and requested a formal family meeting right there in the open lobby. Helen realized the narrative was slipping rapidly from her grasp. She deployed her most desperate, practiced weapon. She burst into tears. It was a masterful performance, honed over decades of manipulating neighborhood association meetings and guilt-tripping local bank tellers. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving with manufactured sobs. She looked at Marcus, her eyes shining with artificial grief, and launched the ultimate victim card. She attempted to sacrifice me to save her crumbling illusion. It is my daughter, Helen cried, her voice echoing dramatically off the marble pillars. Chloe is to blame for this entire disaster. She has always been a bitter, selfish sister. She is intensely jealous of Liam and his success. She could not stand to see him happy with Maya. Helen took a shaky breath, placing a hand over her heart, layering the deception thicker, attempting to weave a tale of financial espionage. Liam trusted her to handle the banking transfers for the venue. She sobbed, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. He transferred his venture capital funds into her corporate account for safekeeping, and she stole it. Chloe embezzled his money and fled the state just to ruin this wedding. She abandoned us at the gates out of pure spite. She wanted to humiliate us in front of your beautiful family. She delivered the lie with such raw, theatrical conviction that a passing stranger might have stopped to offer her condolences. She likely believed the fiction herself in that exact moment, wrapping her fragile ego in a protective blanket of delusion to survive the humiliation. Liam stared at his mother, his jaw slack. He lacked the strategic foresight to understand that accusing a missing person of grand larceny in front of a seasoned corporate litigator is a suicidal maneuver. Maya sat beside her father, her posture stiffening. She scrutinized Liam, searching his face for a flicker of righteous anger, the natural reaction of a man who had just been robbed of his wedding funds by a treacherous sibling. She found only paralyzing fear. Her sharp legal mind registered the discrepancy instantly. Victims of theft demand justice. They call the bank. They call the police. Liam was doing none of those things. He was merely sweating, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Looking terrified of the spotlight, his mother just aimed at him. Marcus did not offer a sympathetic nod. He did not offer Helen a comforting word. He sat back in his leather chair and pushed his gold wire-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose. The gesture was slow, deliberate, and entirely devoid of warmth. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a cold, clinical instrument slicing through the humid air of my mother and her performance. "Mrs. Helen?" Marcus began, his tone dropping the temperature in the lobby by a noticeable degree. "I am a lawyer. My partners and I prosecute financial fraud on a regular basis. Embezzlement of this magnitude is a severe felony." He paused, allowing the harsh legal reality to settle over the cardboard pizza boxes and the velvet couches. "If your daughter has indeed stolen Liam and his investment capital and absconded with the venue deposits, we do not sit in a hotel lobby eating delivery food while lamenting our bad luck. We involve the authorities. I will have my private security team contact the Beverly Hills Police Department right now. We will file a formal report, freeze her corporate assets, and issue a warrant for her arrest tonight." Helen stopped crying immediately. The manufactured tears dried up in a flash, evaporating under the scorching heat of legal accountability. The color drained from her face, leaving her complexion an ashen gray. She opened her mouth to speak, but her vocal cords refused to produce a sound. She realized she had just walked her elaborate lie into a federal trap. Accusing me of being a difficult sister was one thing. Accusing me of a financial crime in front of a man who could easily mobilize a team of prosecutors was a fatal error. Liam trembled. His hands shook so violently he had to stuff them deep into the pockets of his trousers to hide the tremors. He looked at Maya, begging silently for a romantic intervention, hoping she would soothe her father and dismiss the police talk. But his bride looked right through him, her dark eyes analyzing the terrified sweat beading on his forehead. "No," Liam stammered, his voice cracking under the intense pressure of the room. "No police. We do not want to ruin her life. She is still family. We can handle this internally. I will just call my bank and arrange a new credit line in the morning to cover the missing funds. I do not want to press charges against my own sister." Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He ignored Liam entirely. He kept his piercing gaze locked on Helen, stripping away the last remnants of her aristocratic disguise with surgical precision. "I admire your grace, Liam," Marcus stated. the sarcasm subtle but razor sharp. However, before I allow my daughter to marry into a family currently embroiled in a felony embezzlement scandal, I require concrete documentation. We operate on facts in this family, not tears. Marcus extended an open palm across the mahogany coffee table. His demand uncompromising. I want to see the venue rental agreement right now. Pull up the digital copy on your phone. Liam, show me the contract bearing your signature. Show me the banking disclosures outlining the stolen funds. If you are the victim of a crime, produce the paper trail. I want to see the name of the primary guarantor on that document. The demand hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Lies can bend reality temporarily. Tears can manipulate soft emotions. But fiction cannot confront binding legal documents. A signed contract possesses no empathy. It only tells the unvarnished truth. The paperwork would show my name, my signature, and my financial history. It would show that Liam contributed absolutely nothing to his own high society premiere. Helen stood frozen, her designer silk dress feeling more like a straitjacket. Liam stared at Marcus and his extended palm, realizing the executioner had just asked him to hand over the axe. The silence stretched until it felt ready to snap. The conflict had reached its absolute zenith. The foundation of their deceit was exposed, wired with explosives, waiting for a single, final spark to ignite the entire structure. Out in Maui, my phone screen lit up once again. The missed call counter preparing to roll over into the triple digits, signaling that the final desperate move was about to be played. Saturday morning broke over the Hawaiian Islands with pristine clarity. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless azure, reflecting off the gentle, rolling waves of the Pacific Ocean. I sat on my private balcony, dressed in a lightweight linen robe, enjoying a plate of fresh papaya and sliced mango. The tropical air felt soft against my skin, carrying the faint scent of sea salt and blooming hibiscus. It was the morning of my brother's highly anticipated luxury wedding. 3,000 miles away in Beverly Hills, the sun was also rising, illuminating the catastrophic wreckage I had carefully left behind. My cell phone rested beside my coffee cup. The screen illuminated, revealing the lock screen notification center. 110 missed calls. The number stared back at me, a digital monument to their unraveling sanity. Throughout the night, my mother and brother had relentlessly bombarded my device. The panic must have kept them awake, pacing the floor of their luxury hotel suite, watching the hours tick closer to a ceremony they could no longer afford to host. I had allowed them to marinate in their terror. I forced them to spend the entire night trapped in the suffocating realization that their invisible safety net had vanished. They had assumed I would eventually cave. They believed my lifelong habit of fixing their mistakes would override my anger. They thought a few dozen frantic voicemails would guilt me into transferring funds and begging the venue director to open the gates. They fundamentally misunderstood the nature of my departure. I was not throwing a tantrum. I was executing a permanent resignation. Now, the sun was up. The vendors would be demanding final answers. The guests from Atlanta would be expecting to board chartered shuttles to the Malibu coast. The point of no return had officially arrived. I decided the silence had served its purpose. I picked up a slice of mango, savoring the sweet flavor, just as the phone began to vibrate again. Call number 111. The caller identification displayed my mother's name. I swallowed the fruit, reached for the device, swiped the green icon across the glass, and pressed the speakerphone button. I set the phone back down on the glass table, leaned back in my wicker chair, and waited. I did not need to offer a polite greeting. The moment the connection established, a feral shriek erupted from the speaker, piercing the tranquil sound of the ocean waves. "Chloe?" Helen screamed. Her voice was entirely unrecognizable. It was stripped of its refined, high society polish, reduced to raw, hysterical venom. "You have ruined your brother's life. How could you do this to your own family? Pay them right now. You ungrateful bitch. Give them the authorization before the shuttles arrive." Behind her shrill demands, I could hear the distinct acoustic echo of a grand, cavernous space. They were not screaming from the privacy of a hotel room. They were in a public lobby. I heard the faint murmur of hushed voices, the clinking of porcelain coffee cups, and the unmistakable sound of luggage wheels rolling across marble floors. Helen was losing her mind in a public arena, unable to control her volume or her rage. She demanded obedience. She expected me to crumble under the weight of her maternal furies. She thought screaming louder would somehow alter the reality of her barren bank accounts. I did not raise my voice to match her hysteria. When you hold all the leverage, volume is an unnecessary expenditure of energy. I kept my tone entirely flat, projecting the same clinical indifference I used to terminate a negligent vendor contract. I spoke clearly, ensuring every syllable landed with lethal precision. Liam sent me a text message on Thursday night. I replied. My voice was chillingly calm, a sharp contrast to her chaotic shrieking. It sounded like ice cracking over a frozen lake. He specifically ordered me not to bother coming to his wedding. He stated clearly that I was not classy enough to step foot inside his venue. He told me I did not fit the refined aesthetic he promised Maya's family. He wanted me to stay away so I would not embarrass him. I paused, letting my words echo through her phone, ensuring the people standing near her heard every single detail of her son's arrogance. I am simply respecting the groom's explicit decision. I continued. I removed myself from the equation. Currently, I am sitting on a balcony in Hawaii, enjoying a rather excellent plate of tropical fruit. The weather here is beautiful. I will not be authorizing any payments today, tomorrow, or ever again. I suggest you tell your guests the truth. Have a wonderful wedding day with those empty credit cards. I stopped speaking. I did not disconnect the call. I wanted to listen to the impact. The psychological shockwave traveled across the cellular network, striking the Beverly Hills hotel lobby with devastating force. On the other end of the line, a sharp, ragged gasp echoed through the speaker. It was the sound of the woman realizing her designated victim was standing on a separate continent, far beyond the reach of her emotional blackmail. The hysterical screaming ceased instantly. A profound, suffocating silence descended upon the connection. It was the kind of heavy quiet that follows a fatal car crash. In those agonizing seconds, right before the sirens begin to wail, Helen had nothing left to say. Her manipulation tactics required proximity and manufactured guilt to function. I offered her geographical distance and undeniable facts. I had just recited Liam's own malicious words back to her, stripping away any false narrative where they were the innocent victims of my sudden cruelty. I exposed their calculated plot and confirmed my permanent withdrawal from their financial ecosystem. They possessed no backup plan. Liam's venture capital funds did not exist. Helen's retirement accounts were dry. Without my signature, the Malibu estate remained locked. The catering trucks remained stalled. And the entire wedding was officially dead. The fantasy was over. The bill had come due, and the designated payer had left the building. The dead silence stretched for 5 agonizing seconds. I expected the line to go dead. I assumed Helen would hang up in a fit of paralyzing shame, or perhaps drop the phone onto the marble floor as her knees gave out. I reached forward, preparing to press the red end call button and return to my peaceful breakfast. But the call remained active. Someone else picked up the device. The frantic, shallow breathing of my mother faded into the background. The audio profile shifted, indicating a new person held the receiver close to their mouth. The person who spoke next was not Helen. It was not my brother Liam, trembling and begging for a miraculous financial rescue. The voice that came through the speaker was male, but it possessed a rich, authoritative baritone that commanded instant obedience. It was a voice accustomed to silencing crowded boardrooms and dismantling hostile corporate acquisitions without breaking a sweat. It was a voice that did not tolerate deception. "Hello, Chloe," the man said. His tone was not angry. It was dangerously calm, intensely curious. and layered with a quiet, terrifying power. The dynamic of the entire weekend had just shifted on its axis. The truth was about to be dragged into the unforgiving light of day. And the executioner holding the axe was not me. The voice resonating through the speaker of my phone belonged to Marcus. It carried a heavy, unyielding authority that seemed to instantly alter the atmospheric pressure. Even across the Pacific Ocean, the frantic, high-pitched shrieking of my mother had been abruptly severed, replaced by the steady, resonant baritone of a man who dictates terms for a living. "Chloe, this is Marcus," he stated. "I have taken the phone. I have placed this call on speakerphone. My daughter is standing right beside me. Helen and Liam are also present. I want you to tell me exactly what is happening here. And I want the unvarnished truth." I sat up straight in my wicker chair. The ocean breeze blowing across my Hawaiian balcony suddenly felt crisp and deeply energizing. This was the exact intersection of timing and truth I had been anticipating. I set my coffee cup down on the glass table. I took one slow, clarifying breath, centering myself into the executive persona I utilized during high-stakes board meetings. I did not rush my response. I let the silence stretch for a mere 2 seconds, establishing control of the conversation. "Good morning, Marcus," I replied, matching his measured cadence. "First, I want to offer my sincere apologies to you and Maya. You both deserved a beautiful, seamless weekend, and I deeply regret that your family has been dragged into this humiliating theater. However, I can no longer protect the fiction my mother and brother have constructed." I spoke clearly, ensuring the microphone captured every single syllable. "I am not a struggling administrative assistant," I continued. "I do not file paperwork for a local event planner, nor did I embezzle a single cent from Liam. That narrative was fabricated entirely to protect his ego and deceive your family. My name is Chloe, and I am the founder and chief executive officer of Vanguard Luxury Management. My firm handles corporate retreats, foreign dignitary accommodations, and high-net-worth hospitality operations across the West Coast." I paused, allowing the gravity of my actual title to settle over the speakerphone. The ambient noise of the Beverly Hills hotel lobby seemed to mute itself. I could hear a sharp intake of breath. Though whether it belonged to Maya or Helen, I could not determine. "Liam is not a venture capitalist," I stated, my voice steady and surgical. "He possesses no investment portfolio. He is currently carrying $120,000 in unsecured debt from multiple failed startups. He leases his vehicle, and I am the primary guarantor on his loft apartment because his credit score disqualified him from signing the lease agreement." I delivered the financial facts with the sterile precision of an auditor reading a bankruptcy filing. When he realized he could not afford to host a wedding that matched the financial expectations of your Atlanta real estate firm, my mother begged me to intervene. I paid for this entire weekend out of my own pocket. I used my corporate titanium card to secure the caterers, the florists, and the estate. I funded their illusion so Maya would not suffer the heartbreak of a canceled wedding. In return, they introduced me to you as a lowly typist to ensure Liam looked like a financial prodigy. I heard a low, dangerous hum of silence from the other end of the line. Marcus was processing the data, his sharp analytical mind clicking the jagged pieces of the puzzle into a coherent, disturbing picture. But I was not finished. The final layer of my strategy, the ultimate checkmate, was ready for deployment. Furthermore, Marcus, you are currently dealing with a locked gate at the Malibu cliffside estate. Liam likely told you there was a banking error holding up the process. That is a lie. The venue software requires the primary cardholder to be physically present to authorize the final payment. I withdrew my authorization and flew to Hawaii because Liam sent me a text message explicitly ordering me not to attend his wedding. He stated I was not classy enough to mingle with your relatives. I leaned closer to the phone, ensuring my final revelation landed with lethal accuracy. He hid me to protect his fragile facade. But he failed to realize one crucial detail about the property he rented. Vanguard Luxury Management. My company holds the exclusive operational rights to that Malibu estate. We manage the property. If you need verification, please turn around and ask the venue director standing near the gates. His name is Victor. You can tell Victor that his chief executive officer, Chloe, is on the line. The master contract number is Delta 739 Alpha. Ask Victor who signs his paychecks. The execution was flawless. I delivered the stark reality without raising my voice, without resorting to insults, laying out the corporate mechanics of their situation. Over the speakerphone, the resulting chaos erupted not with a shouting match, but with the chilling sound of a physical collapse. A sudden, sharp shriek pierced the audio feed. It was Helen. The sound was followed by a dull thud, resembling a heavy sack of flour dropping onto the polished marble floor of the hotel lobby. My mother, realizing her lifelong campaign of deception had just been broadcast to the very billionaire she sought to impress, lost her capacity to remain upright. Her legs simply gave out. I heard the rustle of her expensive silk dress hitting the ground, accompanied by her frantic, breathless hyperventilation. She was gasping for air, choking on the toxic fumes of her own shattered illusion. Liam did not rush to assist her. He did not speak. He did not attempt to defend himself. I could visualize him standing frozen, his feet rooted to the intricate Persian carpet. The fake Milan suit, the replica watch, the rehearsed swagger, everything melted away, leaving a terrified, indebted fraud staring down the barrel of a ruined reputation. He was paralyzed. The truth had pinned him to the wall, and there was no mother available to negotiate his release. The empire of lies was pulverized into dust. Marcus did not offer sympathy to the weeping woman on the floor. The sound of his steady breathing filled the microphone. I could picture him standing tall, his gold wire-rimmed glasses catching the lobby light, looking down at the crumbling remnants of my family. He did not yell. He did not need to exert physical dominance. I appreciate your transparency, Chloe, Marcus stated. The temperature in his voice could have frozen a river. His response was the ultimate validation. He recognized the business transaction. He respected the documentation. He saw the predator hidden in the grass. And he acknowledged the person who had just handed him the binoculars. He understood that I was a peer, an executive who refused to be leveraged by incompetent relatives. I had cleared the board entirely. I provided the undeniable evidence and exposed the rot hiding beneath the floorboards. But the final move did not belong to me, nor did it belong to Marcus. Behind the authoritative patriarch, another presence stepped forward. The phone rustled as it changed hands once more. Maya had listened to every single word. The brilliant corporate attorney had just been handed the verified evidence of her groom and his ultimate betrayal. And the silence that followed signaled a storm unlike anything my brother had ever faced. The silence on the line following Marcus transferring the device was pregnant with a highly charged tension. Maya held the phone now. I could hear her steady, rhythmic breathing through the speaker, a stark contrast to the frantic hyperventilation my mother had exhibited moments prior. In the high-stakes arena of corporate litigation, attorneys undergo rigorous training to absorb catastrophic disclosures without breaking their professional composure. Maya was a master of her craft. Born into an affluent African-American real estate dynasty in Atlanta, she was raised to navigate exclusive spaces where weakness is instantly targeted and exploited. Integrity was not merely an abstract moral concept for her lineage. It was the concrete currency they utilized to build and secure their empire. Maya did not tolerate deception in her boardrooms, and she certainly would not tolerate it in her marriage. I listened intently as the spatial dynamics of the Beverly Hills hotel lobby shifted. The sharp echo of leather shoes scuffing against marble indicated Liam was moving. He was attempting to close the physical distance between himself and his bride. He was operating under the tragic misconception that physical proximity and his practiced charm could somehow mend a foundation that had just been vaporized. Maya, I can explain, Liam pleaded. His voice lacked any trace of the polished, confident venture capitalist he had spent months portraying. It was a guttural, desperate scramble for survival. I heard the rustle of his custom linen suit as he reached out, attempting to grasp her hand, desperately seeking a physical anchor to prevent his curated world from spinning entirely off its axis. Maya did not scream. She did not throw a theatrical tantrum or hurl insults across the lobby. Dramatic public outbursts are reserved for reality television and insecure socialites like Helen. Women who routinely dismantle fraudulent executives operate with a chilling, silent efficiency. I heard the swift rustle of fabric as Maya pulled her hand back, refusing his touch. She treated his physical contact like a biohazard. Her rejection was not born of sudden anger, but of profound, calculated disgust. She recognized she was looking at a stranger, a hollow shell constructed from stolen assets and borrowed prestige. Through the speaker, a faint metallic clink resonated. Maya was removing her engagement ring. For the past year, Liam had paraded that specific piece of jewelry across social media. He proudly boasted to Maya and her relatives that the diamond was a priceless Porter family heirloom. He spun an elaborate, romantic tale of a vintage cut passed down from our great-grandmother, symbolizing his deep roots and generational stability. I knew the actual origin of that stone. There was no heirloom. Liam purchased that ring at a wholesale jeweler in the downtown Diamond District. He used a secondary corporate expense card I had issued him years ago for emergency medical use. The stone was a commercial-grade cubic zirconia composite, set in cheap white gold, designed to mimic vintage craftsmanship. He financed his eternal promise on my corporate credit line, capping his mountain of lies with a counterfeit diamond. You did not merely lie about money, Liam, Maya stated. Her voice was a masterclass in controlled devastation. She did not raise her pitch or allow her tone to waver. She spoke with the chilling finality of a judge delivering an inescapable sentence. Financial difficulties can be resolved. Debt can be restructured. But you fundamentally fabricated your entire existence. You built our relationship on a stage you could not afford to rent. She paused, ensuring her next words struck the very core of his deceit. This is not about a locked gate or a missing wire transfer. Maya continued. This is about who you are when you think nobody is watching. You trampled on the exact person holding you up. You treated your own sister like a disposable asset, all to serve your pathetic, fragile ego. You hit the woman who financed your life because you were terrified I would realize she is everything you pretend to be. You are a coward. Liam, I do not marry a fraud. I heard a faint, distinct thud over the audio feed. Maya did not hand the counterfeit heirloom back to him. She did not throw it at his chest in a fit of passion. She simply opened her elegant fingers and let the fake diamond fall freely. It hit the thick Persian carpet and rolled away, discarded like a piece of worthless trash. The sound of that ring hitting the floor represented the official termination of my family and their social climbing expedition. The audio feed captured the sound of purposeful, coordinated movement. Marcus stepped forward, his leather shoes clicking sharply on the polished marble. He offered his arm to his daughter. Maya took it without a single second of hesitation. They turned their backs on Liam and the sobbing heap that was my mother. The Atlanta relatives operated with militaristic precision. There were no whispered gossip sessions, no lingering glances of pity, and no dramatic parting words. They moved as a unified front, following Marcus and Maya toward the grand revolving doors of the hotel lobby. They withdrew their presence, taking their generational wealth, their dignity, and their pristine reputation with them. True power knows exactly when to leave a room. I remained on the open line, sitting on my Hawaiian balcony, listening to the hollow echo of the retreating footsteps. The lobby was now a graveyard of social ambition. Helen was still on the floor, her designer dress crumpled around her trembling frame, her theatrical tears having morphed into genuine, hyperventilating panic. Liam stood frozen in the center of the room, staring at the empty space where his fake future had just been standing. He had spent his entire life assuming a handsome smile could outrun reality. He had finally hit a concrete wall he could not charm his way through. I picked up my coffee cup, taking a slow sip of the Kona blend. The tropical sun warmed my skin, providing a stark contrast to the freezing reality my brother was currently experiencing. I felt no guilt. I felt no obligation to step in and soften the blow. I had provided the safety net for a decade, and they had chosen to cut the ropes. The natural consequence of the cutting a safety net is gravity. They were currently in freefall, and the ground was approaching with terrifying speed. The wedding was officially dead, and the social execution was flawlessly completed. However, the financial mechanics of a canceled luxury event do not simply evaporate when the bride walks away. When an elite estate is locked down due to client misrepresentation, the corporate insurance protocols initiate automatically. Maya and Marcus were safely insulated, walking out into the California sun, their legal and financial standing untouched. But my brother and mother were about to discover that the vendors they had left idling on the canyon road were not going to simply drive away empty-handed. The emotional slaughter had concluded, but the financial reckoning was just getting started. I disconnected the call, leaving them to face the incoming avalanche alone. I terminated the connection. The audio feed cut abruptly, replacing the frantic atmosphere of the Beverly Hills hotel lobby with the rhythmic crash of the Hawaiian waves below my balcony. I set the phone down and opened my laptop on the glass patio table. The time for observation had concluded. The moment for administrative execution had arrived. In the luxury hospitality sector, cancellation is not a manual process reliant on human emotion or hesitant negotiations. It is a highly automated, algorithmic protocol designed to protect capital. I accessed the Vanguard Luxury Management Command dashboard and navigated to the specific file housing the Malibu estate contracts. I bypassed the standard cancellation options and selected the severe termination clause, citing explicit client misrepresentation and financial fraud. I clicked Execute. Within 3 seconds, the venue management software dispatched encrypted cancellation notices to every contractor currently idling on the Pacific Coast Highway. My corporate insurance policy is an ironclad fortress engineered by seasoned risk analysts. Because the cancellation stemmed directly from documented deceit, my initial deposits were fully protected under our fraud indemnification shield. The financial burden instantly detached from my corporate accounts. The liability required a new host, and my brother and mother had eagerly provided their necks for the noose weeks prior. During the initial planning phases, Helen pushed relentlessly to utilize specific, high-end florists and exclusive catering teams, demanding upgrades that exceeded the baseline budget. To appease her demands, I required both Liam and Helen to sign the secondary vendor compensation addendums. They signed those documents blindly, assuming my credit card would shield them indefinitely from any real-world consequences. They signed their own financial death warrants just to secure premium imported orchids and vintage champagne. Now, the automated system generated a consolidated invoice for $45,000 in breach of contract penalties. That invoice bypassed my inbox entirely. It routed directly to Liam, accompanied by an immediate payment demand from the vendor legal coalition. Back on the dusty canyon road, the digital execution manifested in harsh physical reality. The floral director, checking his tablet, saw the cancellation alert flash across his screen in bold red text. He signaled his drivers. The heavy diesel engines roared to life, not to unload their delicate cargo, but to turn around. The premium beverage suppliers secured their cargo bays, locking away the vintage spirits Liam intended to serve his distinguished guests. Liam, abandoned by the Atlanta dynasty, was left standing on the asphalt as a parade of commercial trucks drove away, taking his fabricated high society premiere with them. The vendors did not look at him with pity or sympathy. They looked at him as a toxic liability, a man who wasted their Saturday and owed them substantial compensation. He stood alone outside the locked wrought iron gates of the Malibu estate, watching the dust settle over his ruined fantasy. The destruction extended far beyond a ruined weekend. The blast radius of this disaster decimated my brother's professional facade. Marcus is not a man who keeps quiet when insulated by arrogant amateurs. The Atlanta real estate patriarch possesses a formidable contact list that bridges the elite financial sectors of Georgia and California. By Monday morning, the true narrative of Liam and his hollow venture capitalist persona circulated through the exclusive investment circles he had so desperately tried to infiltrate. Word travels with lethal speed among people who manage genuine wealth. They protect their ecosystems from parasites. When Liam attempted to secure a high-interest bridge loan later that week to cover his new $45,000 vendor debt, the private lenders rejected his applications before he even sat down in their waiting rooms. His credibility was incinerated. The slick, confident entrepreneur died in that Beverly Hills lobby. The man left behind was a known fraud, blacklisted by every reputable banking institution on the West Coast. 2 weeks later, the leasing agency financing his sleek imported sports car dispatched a recovery team. They arrived at his downtown loft in the middle of the night, hooked his vehicle to a tow truck, and drove it away. He was forced to watch from his window, stripped of his primary status symbol, unable to stop the repossession because his bank accounts were frozen by vendor litigation. Helen faced a different, yet equally devastating, variety of ruin. My mother spent 3 decades meticulously cultivating an aristocratic image, treating her neighborhood social group as her personal royal court. She had mailed over 100 thick, embossed invitations to her country club acquaintances, boasting relentlessly about her son marrying into an Atlanta real estate dynasty. She promised them a spectacle of unparalleled luxury, ensuring everyone in her circle knew she was ascending to a higher social echelon. Instead, the rumor mill provided her friends with the unvarnished truth. They learned about the fake cubic zirconia diamond left on the lobby floor. They heard about the locked gates, the stolen credit line, and the humiliating exit of the bride. Helen became a social pariah overnight. The women who used to drink mimosas on our patio now crossed the street when they saw her approaching the local market. The charity board she clawed her way onto quietly removed her name from their registry. She stopped visiting the luxury boutiques where she used to browse items she could not afford. She became a prisoner in her own home, hiding behind drawn blinds. The slate gray designer silk dress she purchased for the rehearsal dinner hung in her closet like a shroud, a constant reminder of the day her empire collapsed. She was terrified of the mocking whispers and the judging stares of the exact people she spent her entire life trying to impress. The most severe punishment I inflicted upon my family was not born of rage or fiery vengeance. True justice rarely involves shouting. The cruelest penalty was simply removing my financial shield and allowing gravity to do its work. I returned them to their baseline reality. I stripped away the stolen prestige, the rented cars, and the counterfeit diamonds, forcing them to inhabit the lowly, ordinary status they loathed with every fiber of their being. They were broke, exposed, and entirely unremarkable. I spent the next 3 days exploring the volcanic landscapes of Maui, swimming in the warm ocean, and sleeping without the constant, gnawing anxiety of managing their crises. I felt lighter, as if a physical weight had been surgically extracted from my spine. Yet, parasites rarely accept starvation quietly. They will always make one final, desperate attempt to reattach themselves to the host. 3 days after the Malibu disaster, as I sat on the beach watching the sunset paint the Hawaiian sky in brilliant shades of coral and gold, my phone screen illuminated one last time. A lengthy text message from Helen appeared on the lock screen, a digital white flag waving from the wreckage, setting the stage for her final maneuver and cementing the eternal boundary I was about to draw. 3 days passed since the collapse of the Malibu wedding. I sat on the private lanai of my Maui suite, watching the sky transition from a bruised purple to a deep, burning orange. The Pacific Ocean stretched out before me, An endless expanse of dark water swallowing the last remnants of the afternoon sun. A glass of chilled bourbon rested in my hand, the condensation slowly dripping down the crystal curve. The tropical air carried the faint scent of sea salt and blooming jasmine. It was the kind of tranquil, unbothered silence that wealth can facilitate, but only true peace can sustain. 3,000 miles away, the California sun was setting over a very different reality. My cell phone sat on the glass patio table. For 72 hours, it had remained a dormant piece of metal. I had ignored the frantic aftermath, allowing the legal system and the venue insurance algorithms to handle the wreckage. I did not monitor their social media profiles. I did not reach out to mutual acquaintances to gauge the fallout. I simply let them marinate in the toxic stew they cooked for themselves. Then, the screen illuminated. A single notification breached the digital barrier. A lengthy text message from Helen arrived. It was not a concise message. It was a sprawling, disjointed manifesto that required me to scroll 3 separate times to reach the bottom. Helen had exhausted her supply of rage. She realized anger yielded zero capital, so she pivoted to her secondary weapon of choice. She deployed manufactured remorse. I read the words scrolling across the glowing screen. She started with false endearments, referring to me as her precious daughter, claiming she had not slept a single minute since Friday. She painted a pathetic portrait of my brother, stating Liam was currently sitting in the dark, unable to eat, deeply repentant for his foolish mistakes. The text was a masterclass in narcissistic bargaining. Helen did not offer a genuine apology for treating me like a disposable asset. She apologized that things got out of hand. She blamed the immense stress of high society expectations, suggesting the pressure had temporarily clouded their judgment. Then came the true objective of her digital olive branch, the financial pivot. She begged me to pick up the phone and call Marcus. She insisted that if I just explained the situation to the Atlanta patriarch, if I just smoothed over the rough edges of the financial fraud, Maya might reconsider the engagement. The delusion was staggering. But the final paragraph contained the actual invoice. Helen wrote that the vendor coalition had served them with a formal payment demand for $45,000 in breach of contract penalties. She claimed she was facing personal bankruptcy. She typed the exact phrase that toxic relatives use as a universal skeleton key to unlock closed doors. She stated that we were still family. She begged me to help them. She pleaded with me to pay the vendor debt because we were blood. And blood forgives. I sat there on the balcony, reading those words while the Hawaiian breeze rustled the palm fronds below. 10 years ago, reading a message like that would have triggered a severe anxiety response. I would have felt the crushing weight of obligation. I would have logged into my banking portal, transferred the $45,000 to save my mother from public ruin, and spent weeks justifying their abuse in my head. I would have rationalized that family requires sacrifice. Tonight, I felt nothing of the sort. My heart rate did not elevate. My breathing remained slow and rhythmic, matching the tide rolling onto the beach. I looked at the long paragraph of tear-stained manipulation and saw it for exactly what it was. It was not a mother reaching out to her child. It was a hostage negotiator trying to coax a bank vault back into the building. She did not miss me. She missed my titanium credit card. She missed the invisible safety net that allowed her to play an aristocratic matriarch without bearing the financial risk. In cheap television dramas, this is the moment the protagonist calls the villain back. They engage in a screaming match, delivering a lengthy monologue about their trauma and demanding validation. I did not do that. Validation from a parasite is worthless. You do not explain your boundaries to a mosquito. You simply close the window. I tapped the information icon at the top of the text thread. I navigated to the contact settings. My thumb hovered over the red text at the bottom of the screen that offered to block the caller. I pressed it. The system asked for confirmation. I pressed confirm. I repeated the exact same process for Liam. I did not send a fiery parting shot. I did not demand the last word. I erased them. I closed the digital door and engaged the heavy iron deadbolt. ensuring their manufactured crises would never again cross my threshold. The screen went dark. I set the phone face down on the glass table. There was no grand explosion, no sudden orchestra swelling in the background. There was just the quiet, satisfying click of the lock sliding into place. I spent a decade attempting to purchase their love, believing that if I just proved my utility, they would eventually grant me a seat at their table. I sacrificed my peace to fund their fake prestige. I allowed them to introduce me as a lowly typist because I thought swallowing my pride would earn their loyalty. I realized the profound error in my calculation. My value never depended on the recognition of people who viewed me as a tool. A hammer does not need the permission of a carpenter to be heavy. I built a luxury hospitality empire from a cramped apartment. I command boardrooms. I orchestrate events for international dignitaries. The company I forged with my own hands. The employees who rely on my leadership. The network of peers who respect my intellect. That is my actual family. That is the empire I need to protect. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my bourbon. The liquid burned pleasantly down my throat, a warm contrast to the cool evening air. I listened to the waves crashing against the volcanic rocks, a relentless, powerful rhythm that washes away anything built on a fragile foundation. Everything had finally settled into its correct position. Liam was back in his empty loft, facing a mountain of debt he could no longer hide. Helen was trapped in her suburban home, suffocating under the weight of her ruined social standing. And I was sitting in a corner suite on a tropical island, holding the keys to my own kingdom. This brings us to the end of the line. I am sharing this narrative because I know there is someone out there listening right now who is trapped in that exact same cycle. You are sitting at a table where your accomplishments are minimized, your boundaries are mocked, and your resources are drained by people who claim to love you. You are hiding your true stature because your brilliance makes your relatives uncomfortable. You are acting as the foundational pillar for a family that would gladly let you collapse if it meant saving their own public image. Hear me clearly. If your family demands that you shrink yourself so they can appear taller, it is time to leave the room. Stop arguing with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Stop handing your credit card to individuals who treat you like a vendor. Gather your dignity, pack your bags, and book the flight. Do not announce your departure. Do not wait for an apology that will never arrive in a genuine package. Just step away and let gravity do the work. The most ruthless weapon you can deploy against arrogant manipulators is not your anger. It is your permanent, unapologetic absence. Let them figure out how to pay the bill when you are no longer sitting at the table. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this story validated a hard choice you had to make, or if it gave you the courage to finally book your own one-way ticket out of a toxic dynamic, leave a comment below. Tell me about the moment you realized your worth was no longer up for negotiation. Hit the like button, subscribe to Silent Vengeance Stories, and turn on notifications. I will see you in the next story.